Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for a conversation with Deirdre McNamer and Jill McCorkle about Dee's new novel, Aviary. My name is Talia, and I'm the events manager here at Flyleaf. If you're new to Flyleaf, I encourage you to browse our full events calendar by clicking the Flyleaf Books logo above us. I've been busy adding listings to our calendar for the spring and summer season, and there are many more to come, so be sure to follow us on Crowdcast so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to support the store and our guests, please keep in mind that Aviary, as well as other books from these authors, are available from Flyleaf. We are currently open for browsing, so you can come in to shop or click the link below our faces to buy your copies online. Now I will go ahead and introduce tonight's guests. First up, Deirdre McNamer is the author of 4 previous novels. Her essays, short fiction, and reviews have appeared in The New Yorker, Plowshares, and The New York Times, and Outside, among other venues. McNamer chaired the fiction panel of the National Book Awards in 2011 and was a judge for the 2015 PEN Faulkner Award. She has taught writing at many colleges and universities over the course of her career, and she currently holds a faculty position in the low residency MFA program of the Bennington Writing Seminars. She lives in Missoula, Montana. And today, our conversation partner is Jill McCorkle. A native of Lumberton, North Carolina, Jill went to UNC and had her first 2 novels published simultaneously when she was just out of college. Since then, she's published many novels and short story collections. Her newest, Hieroglyphics, will be published in paperback next month, so be sure to pre-order your copy at the link below our faces. Jill was a Briggs Copeland Lecturer in Fiction at Harvard, where she also chaired the Department of Creative Writing. She is currently a faculty member at the Bennington Writing Seminars as well, and she's affiliated with the MFA program at NC State. Thank you both so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill, for agreeing to do this with me. We teach at Bennington together, and that's how we know each other. And we're fans of each other's work and realize that we both tend to not infrequently write about older people, older even than we are. And so
yes, it is such an honor to get to be here and celebrate this beautiful novel. It is extraordinary. I'm going to show this jacket right here so we keep flashing it.
A quick note before we get started, if anyone has a question throughout the event, you can click the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of your screen and type that in, or you can type it in the chat. And once Jill and Dee are done with their conversation with each other, we will open the floor up for questions. So feel free to send them whenever, but we will ask them at the end of the event. And to keep the focus on Dee and Jill, I'm going to turn off my microphone and video just to put the spotlight on our fabulous guest tonight. So y'all have the floor.
And we'll see you at the end, right?
Yes.
With questions. Great. Thank you. Dee, wonderful. I think to begin with a little reading would be fabulous.
Sure. This is a novel set in a small little intermountain city in the West, pretty much like where I live, Missoula. And I'm always rather interested in the edges of the days wherever I am. And this one is an edge of a day in Missoula. The book revolves around an apartment condominium building that is for older people. And so most of the characters are in their 80s, and this is just as a day starts for them. While they slept, the sun lifted itself above the mountains surround to spread light on the little city below. Inside that city, urban deer glided across frozen November lawns to return to their hollows under backyard pines. Feline huntresses licked the blood off their paws and went home for kibbles and stomach rubs. A tied-up, shivering dog made 3 tight circles in the dirt and began to bark. 2 joggers with lights on their shoes panted grimly and stepped up their pace. An old falcon moved slowly, ejecting rolled newspapers onto front steps. And then a roseate calm prevailed, and the mountains moved in closer. While they slept in their boxes inside the bigger box of their 4-story building, street sounds began. The buses, the early workers. The river moved with low water deliberation through the center of town, carrying oblong shards of ice beneath one bridge and then another. A muttering man with crazy hair dragged a lumpy sleeping bag from a stand of tall bushes and resettled himself beneath the second bridge, up under the trusses, a few yards from the coffee place on the ground floor of the new bank. They slept not far from the river in a neighborhood thickly planted with maples and tall old homes in a 24-unit residence for seniors called Pheasant Run. They slept at Pheasant Run and then they woke and prepared to move into a day with nothing yet about it to suggest the small and large shocks to come. I'm skipping just a little bit here. I just want to get to one of the characters. At 6:30, Cassie McMacken in number 412, an early riser by habit, drank her coffee and counted the pills she had accumulated during her late husband's long decline. There were relaxants that had unsuccessfully addressed his night roaming, plus several versions of painkillers prescribed after 2 falls and some broken ribs, and so dizzy-making for Neil that he started giving them wary, sidelong looks whenever she urged one on him, and it soon became clear that nothing was better than something. Now she had a couple of fistfuls in the narcotic and soporific categories, and this evening she would take them all with anti-nausea medication and as much wine as she could get down. It was time. She had become tired of the world. Her blood didn't want to go anywhere anymore, and had it not been for the instructions of her bossy and indefatigable heart, it wouldn't. She didn't want to occupy some interminable waiting room where nothing was wrong and nothing was right, her motions mechanical, eyes on the tyrant clock. It was time. So that's sort of dark, but that's the, it doesn't stay that dark. And this is just one of the main characters in the book. A fire breaks out in the building that they're in, and there's a sort of surface mystery to the whole thing, which is trying to solve what happened. Who appears to be an arson, and so there's a detective and so on. But it finally fans out, I hope, into being an exploration of bigger mysteries than the sort of small m mystery of the fire in the building.
Oh, it definitely is, because it's such an exploration of life, what constitutes an individual life. And throughout the novel, they are all in their own ways trying to give words to memory, and what it means, defining memory, understanding what's going on. And one of the great perks, one of many, of having Dee as a colleague at Bennington is we often get to hear early versions of works in progress. And several years ago, I heard you read this opening, and you left out some of the physical description of what's going on with the trees, leaves clinging to the branches this particular year, and it's got people all, worried and wondering, and there's something really ominous, and that sense of something not quite right is pervasive, I think, through the novel. But we were talking the other day. I mean, you wrote this pre-pandemic, and yet in so many ways, everything that's in this novel feels even more timely. I mean, it is something that is timeless in its importance, but it seems so pertinent to where we've been this past year.
Yeah, and it's odd and actually a little spooky for me. It has been, because I did realize as I was finishing this book well before the pandemic that several characters in it seem to be saying something big is coming, something is off. Yeah, there was an early freeze and the leaves are just refusing to fall off the trees and they look dead, but they won't fall. And there's another character who is an animal communicator, and she tells her husband, the animals are upset, something is coming, something is wrong. And so it was when, in fact, this 2020, regaled us all with such dire and distressful events going on and a world pandemic. I looked at that and I just had this odd little thought that the book sort of seemed to know more than I had consciously known. There were these characters predicting things, but the characters themselves in various ways were sort of discountable, so you could sort of laugh at them or that they were exaggerating or whatever, but there it was. So it gave me a little shiver, I have to say.
Yeah. And your eye as a writer is really on everyone. Like I love the description, even of the man under the bridge. I mean, it's just the whole novel is so fine-tuned to the movement of life, sort of every living thing. And I'm just so bowled over by this cast of characters because we have women, we have men, we have these wonderful younger characters. I mean, I'm thinking Dee's been hanging out in, teenage college haunts because just the language and the detail. And you read the novel and you're very much moving it from one whole life into another. And I was so aware of then the overlaps, Raven and Viola together and sort of the various pairings of these characters as their lives bump up against each other in very interesting ways too.
Well,
I think a little about, where all these people came from, maybe who was first.
I thought the same thing when I was rereading Hieroglyphics recently, Jill's latest book, which is, there's a sort of surface, this couple retires to North Carolina, and there's a kind of a peaceful surface to the place. But very quickly, like right at the opening of the book, in fact, that the woman who is living in the home of the elderly man where he spent his early days is fragile and fearful and in trouble. And so sometimes these kind of veneers of places fascinate me, and because usually there is some kind of trouble under, right, not so far underneath the surface sometimes. And that's why I wanted that man under the bridge right at the beginning, because you could take a peaceful walk along a river in Missoula and maybe not see anybody like that. But the trouble is there. And some, often you do. It's, I don't know, it just texturizes a place for me to think of the various layers and the way that sometimes so much effort is expended on the part of someone of us who live in seemingly peaceful seeming places, don't want to look at what's pretty near all of the time, including older people. And we've both written about older people reckoning with their lives, which is a very dramatic period of a person's life, which is toward the end, and there isn't time really to fix a lot, but you can try to understand it. And that's another kind of stress and, a really kind of fraught enterprise, I think. And I'm fascinated with it, as I know you are too.
Yeah, well, I am, because, you see the man under the bridge, and, you cannot help but wonder about the road not taken,
Mm-hmm.
or where this turn came in his life, and there he is alongside Cassie, coming to this decision about her own life. She's ready to, at least at that point, call it a day, and then we have Viola sort of out there, hitching a ride and on this adventure. And I felt with so many of the characters, one false move and they take a turn, like, the man under the bridge. I think his presence establishes how tenuous everything is. We could take the wrong turn at any second.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you have, even the detective, everybody's got that internal life. And I don't want to give too much away, but you do a wonderful job with these men, Mackie, Leo.
Mackie is the fire inspector, and I made him up, obviously, but it was interesting to think about his wife is the animal communicator, and she's a very sort of eccentric, effervescent, entertaining, very alive and funny kind of person. And he's he's somber and doesn't really want to be that somber. So I just was interested in looking at the dynamics of certain kinds of relationships where the very firm personalities of each person sort of complement the other one. And he is just welcoming this sort of unexpected quality in this relatively recent marriage with his second wife, because he came from a kind of grim and joyless background. And so I liked to think about that and try to make him seem real and her seem real. And he's also a little quirky in that he has a hyper-developed sense of smell, which is the scientific term is hyperosmia. And so, he can smell almost as, he can smell as well as a dog almost. And it really helps him in his job. And I thought, oh, this is a little outlandish when I knew that it existed in some people, but I thought, oh, maybe I'm a little over the top here, focusing so much on someone's smelling powers. And then lo and behold, smell now has become another big central recent topic, because one effect of COVID in some survivors is that they're robbed of smell. And what does that mean? And so I've read come across several long articles about smell and the lack of smell and when it's highly enhanced. And I went, I've been thinking about this for quite a long time.
And suddenly Crock-Pot Creations and Sheet Cakes.
Right.
That was one of those places. There's a lot of wonderful humor throughout, because the characters are, very much characters, even in difficult places. That just the the personalities that come through. So there's a wonderful blend of humor in there.
I was going to ask you about that, Jill. I think that's, I love to read fiction that sort of invites me to be emotionally invested in it, but also to laugh, to see, what's funny in a situation. And you do that so frequently, and it's been a strand running through so much of your work, and successfully, but I think it's risky sometimes. I think when we're doing that, we think it can be easy to seem to be discounting a character when it's especially in the early stages of writing about them, I think. And so I wanted to just pick your brain a little bit about how you have avoided that. What does a writer do to make a character both be taken very seriously ultimately by a reader, but also allows that reader to laugh, not necessarily at the character, but sort of with the character? How do you manage that?
Well, I think it's exactly what you're doing. You place these people in life in a way that's we identify with it, and there's hardship. But I think even in the most dire situation, people are still saying things, that are comical, whether they intend them to be or not, or, just something misunderstood, some meaning of something, or I think I mentioned to you, I love that moment when, Viola gets her clothes. Where have they stopped, and the description of her outfit was funny to me, even in this, she's kind of on the run there, but
she's been abandoned on a mountain pass, basically, for very complicated reasons. But this runaway teenage girl picks her up, and they're just hightailing it for California. And Viola was abducted in her pajamas, basically. So the girl had to buy her something at a rest stop that she could wear. And it's basically these flannel pants with little dinosaurs all over them. And so, it's just, I think sometimes it's just having putting a semi-dire situation next to kind of ludicrous human taste and eccentricity can be a pretty potent combination sometimes. You can't discount the person, but you are sort of invited to laugh at the extremes to which we all will go, to kind of take care of ourselves. And sometimes it's very comical.
Well, and I think that's exactly it. When Raven presents her, with these clothes, there's something endearing about it, and we're getting to know this girl, this runaway, and here she is with this old woman in her pajamas. I mean, when you describe it, there definitely is humor there. But you never stay on the surface. And I think that's the difference between, what is pure comedy or slapstick and the work of drama. Because in that particular context, it's kind of comic relief of sorts, and it's character development. And most important of all, and I think we say this to our students all the time, once you paint the picture, it's there. We're not going to forget it. So those dinosaurs on her pants stay with us. you know,
That's even funny to say.
painting. You give a character an interest, a passion, an occupation, and all of these characters are so well rounded. But again, I would say that thematically, I just felt there were little threads connecting everyone, and it's very much about memory. And you referred to the secret of ongoingness, and that doesn't just apply to someone at the end of life. I mean, it's every step of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these kids figuring it out. The wonderful Clayton, who I fell in love with, who tells her he wants to be a veteran when he means veterinarian. Speaking of wonderful comic moments, and she very kindly, does not correct him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that maybe that's sort of one bottom line rule. I see several of our fabulous students are checking in here, former students of each of us, and we probably already.
I've got to look. I wasn't even looking. I wasn't even looking at all these names.
Yeah, they popped up on my screen. Annaman and Jordana. But I've said it in class, the teaching relationship, but that is why I think a lot of people who are trying to write, you think, every foray I make has to count, it has to go into the book. You're describing a character to yourself or whatever. And I think that what we're talking about right now is the argument against getting too efficient while you're trying to write something maybe on the long side, because any step you take to increase your own knowledge of who your characters are is going to make them more layered, and it will accommodate humor and it will accommodate tragedy as well. But you have to know them well enough and have stayed with them long enough that seems natural, instead of, as you say, kind of laid on tricky stuff, some equivalent of a one-liner, a disparaging description of someone that sort of seems like the writer trying to be seen as clever rather than the character seen as multidimensional. And so I think all of that sort of writing on a character, that's one value of it.
Absolutely.
Even later on, whatever. But
and the physical world again. I mean, again, you do use nature in a way that's very powerful, and and it comes back around. And I don't want to give away anything in resolution. But the ending is just absolutely stunning. Just one of those where it just satisfies and brings us to just a really important place, and it's one of those that makes you want to sort of go back and reread the beginning, because it really does bring us full circle in so many different ways, not just solving mysteries along the way, but just the whole depiction of life. And I love how much life is in these people and this place. There's a lot going on.
And several of them, as it turns, things happen to them in the course of the novel that represent, in a couple of cases, sort of second chances that they might not have expected for themselves. And you did that in Life After Life as well. That's the theme running through that, is that it isn't over until it's over. And I like to think about that too, which is that you can get really toward the last phase of your likely span, and the most outlandish or interesting or unforeseen and positive developments can happen. It happens, or disaster can occur on a dime, you know. But I like that. I like to think also about how, and I know people who have, in the very last years of their life, have discovered someone or some interest or something that has just really whipped them up and all over again. And that's nice to have happen and to think about happening.
Yes, well, you and I have shared many parental stories along the way, you know, dealing with parents and people we love coming into those new places. And I mean, it is universal. And I'm looking right here because there are some questions. Should I open it? Like Jordana has a question here.
Would y'all like me to read out some questions?
Yeah, sure. And then
because there are so many of Dee's former students.
That's awesome.
want them to get in there. That would be great.
Erica.
Yeah, so let's kick things off with this top question from Jordana, who said, as a culture, we're so infatuated with youth and possibly middle age. What is it that keeps you interested in old people we generally dismiss?
That's a good question. One reason I'm interested in is the fact that we do dismiss them. That's why I'm interested in them. Why are we as a culture and a society so eager to just forget, really, or try not to think too much about people who may be carrying around huge stories in their life, or if not highly dramatic, you know, rich lives. They have things to say. And other cultures, I mean, I remember going to Greece ages ago. I was in my 20s, and well, they didn't treat their old women that well, but their old men were just revered in these villages. They'd sit around and talk and dispense wisdom, and their lives weren't a bit over, or they weren't really sort of put away when they were old. So that's one reason, is that I am disturbed and would like to see a change in the way that we treat old people, as if if they can't contribute economically, or they don't have the physical facility or mental acuity that they used to, then their value has diminished. I think that's kind of a travesty. So that's why I like to write about them. Probably also because I'm 70. I turned 70 this year, and it's very much on my mind, you know. And so I'd like it to all be a lot better for me in about 15 years, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Jill, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I just second all that Dee just said. I mean, there's so much to honor and learn. You know, I mean, I know so many people. Yeah, I mean, I would credit so much of what I know, and I grew up with a lot of older relatives, you know, and even as a kid, I often preferred to be with them because they were telling stories, and I really soaked up all that they had to teach. Even if you grow up to have a different opinion a level of respect that I would hope to see continue for sure.
There's a somewhat related question here from Craig, who says, more and more we tend to expand the definition of what it means to be old. For instance, 70 is the new 60, 60 is the new 50, so on and so forth. Does this ever-evolving concept affect your character development?
That's a tough one. My sense is that people who are, in their 80s, say, are not doing that too much. They don't feel like they're 60 or 55 anymore. I think it's those of us who are somewhat younger who are sort of guarding ourselves against the ravages of age, so-called, by telling ourselves that we are actually younger than our years. There's a sort of terror of growing old particularly in this country, and losing lots of things. Your agility, as we were talking about before, your ability to have people take you seriously and so on. But I think that sort of, my sister-in-law just said to me recently that she had just turned 70, and she said, well, it's the new 55, I think she said. And yeah, I think we all just console ourselves in different sorts of ways.
Well, and I really do believe, we often say, oh, I wish I could go back. I wish I could do this. But rarely do we want to go back and be exactly who we were then. We want to go back and have maybe the energy or the body with the mind that's here now. I think so much the desire to go back is to be able to transport the development and wisdom along the way, and back to what we were saying. I mean, there's so much valuable information and history lost when we do lose someone, because there's never enough time in the world to hear all the stories and to know all that an individual has to tell. And there's
interesting, I completely agree with what you just said. And it's, there was a news story recently that in Montana, near where I grew up in northern Montana, is the Blackfeet Indian Reservation. And it was a story about how absolutely strict they have been on the reservation, though they in controlling the coronavirus, and to the extent that last summer they shut down businesses that were on the reservation, but also on the east edge of Glacier Park, at a great economic cost to the tribe, just to keep their people safe. And the people that they were concerned about were the elders. There were only 10 or 12 Blackfeet, I think that number's right, who were fluent in their tribal language, who knew a lot of the, they were cultural repositories, and they were terrified of losing those people before they'd had a chance to pass on what only they could to younger generations. And I thought that was really admirable. I mean, they really at a cost to, certainly their economy, but also, in terms of being able to move around freely and all of the things that we've all gone through in some form or another. But it was very specifically to save probably 15 to 20 people who knew what nobody else knew.
Wow. And that's That's really a beautiful, beautiful act.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
Absolutely. Let that catch on.
Yes, really.
I have a question here from Amy, who asks about the structure of Aviary. So Amy says the book is divided into large sections. For example, it's like a lion at the door and verges, as well as smaller chapters. I'm interested in how you came up with the larger sections and if you thought
him near the time when he was starting to lose his memory that it wasn't a completely firm case for suicide. All of which is to say, I thought that mystery was a kind of propelling way to tell a story. What happened? The reader reads to find out maybe, what happened. I fictionalized it so I could make anything happen that I wanted to have happen. But what I've found is I will start with these surface mysteries sometimes, how did he die? In another one of my novels, there's a shooting, and the reader is being asked to wonder, who did it. But then I find that I get so involved with these characters over time that the bigger mysteries sort of take over, and I become less interested in the sort of classic whodunit kind of mystery. But I think what the question might be about is maybe a feeling that I like to read and that I hope I'm writing sometimes, which is that maybe the word might be uncanny, that there is an uncanny dimension to life sort of everywhere. I mean, there's a sub layer of the inexplicable, the strange, the spiritual maybe, that I feel underlies so much about human behavior, and whether you don't have to be strictly religious or even religious to have that sense, but it's just that there's this kind of a shimmering, uncanny quality sometimes running beneath the most ordinary seeming surface events. And I like to tap into that if I can. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I think you answered it beautifully.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I have a sort of similar question here from Anneman, who asks,
Anneman, hi.
Hi, Anneman. Our students, we love them so much.
The question is, you have such a marvelous sense of humor. Do you write knowing you're funny or aware of the humor, or are you laughing aloud, or does it just come surprising you?
Well, Anneman has a pretty good sense of humor too.
Yeah.
It's a huge relief, I think, if you can find people that you laugh with, and not just sort of hearty-har party laughing, but just seeing with somebody else or by yourself a certain kind of absurdity that really runs through human behavior that I find actually more often than not endearing, but it's just ridiculous sometimes how we're all so ridiculous at times. And I really like to, I don't think, I like to laugh, and I like to write things that people will find themselves able to laugh with. I'm not really interested in, just direct satire, that kind of armored humor where you're making fun of in a dismissive way of characters. But I think that the other kind, that kind of laughing with a character or laughing with each other as you think about a certain aspect of human behavior is really fresh air. It opens things up. It's freeing, and it's liberating to be able to laugh. And so, yeah, I look for it in what I read. I look for it in other people, and I hope it's there in my writing.
It's definitely in your writing. I think it keeps you young too.
I hope so. I do too.
There was an article that came out where they talked about laughter was like a good workout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That's right. Well, it's kind of the opposite of becoming really, really brittle. You know, that's one way I don't want to get old, is just to get, you know, kind of unresponsive and brittle, unable to be flexible enough to laugh. So in that way, I think it's a youthful characteristic too.
I do too.
Yeah, definitely. And then it looks like that was the last question from the audience. So I have a quick question for you I like to ask to all of our authors at the end of the event. What are you working on writing-wise, and what are you currently reading, or a recent favorite?
I took so long to write this in one way or another that I'm really looking forward to trying to finish some shorter pieces stories that I've been working on. I want to try to do that. I also have a great big long project that may or may not be fiction. It involves Montana's missile systems and the little town that I grew up in, and it's been nagging at me, facets of it, for almost 20 years. And I'm getting pieces of it written, and I think I actually might be returning, in whatever this turns out to be, to the very small little town where I spent my time until I was 10 years old. And it's in the middle of a huge underground nuclear system in north central Montana. So there's always this sense of, there was for us, even when we were little, a sense of kind of big dire things out there under the wheat. And so I'm going to be working more on that. I have a former student, Kelly McClory, who was here at Montana. She's got a wonderful book coming out in July from Echo called Nobody, Somebody, Anybody. And it's hilarious and very, really pulls at your heart. It's just that great combination. A maid working in a yacht club, it's basically the protagonist. And another former student, Jules Oman, she's wrote a novel based on her own experience as a model, and it's funny, and just I'm so proud of them. And it happens. They've been working on these for some years now, and here they come. I read I tend to gravitate to it seems like Irish writers a lot, and one recent one was I go back to Monroe and Carson McCullers. Maggie O'Farrell wrote a book called Hamnet, which is it's just so lush and really beautifully written. It's she posits, it's a story about Shakespeare's son that died young, but it's mainly focused on the mother and the son. You don't hear much about Shakespeare's wife. And a guy named John McGregor wrote a book called Reservoir 13. He's from England. Really strange, eerie. It has the boldness to just seem to be talking about a little town in which a young woman disappeared from the town. So there's a crime. He has this little mystery up in the front, but finally the mystery is just how this town evolves in detail over several years after this disappearance, this cast of characters. So in fact, I think I might have gotten a little kind of a hint from him about how to do ensemble pieces set in kind of restricted environments. Anyway, that's a couple of recent ones. There's so much great stuff out there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been, while you were talking, I was pulling links. So they're in the chat if anybody wants to learn more about those books.
That's fabulous.
Great.
And didn't you read at Bennington? The last time you read a piece from this new work.
Oh, that's the missile.
Yes. Yeah. It was wonderful.
Yeah, that sounds
Well,
great.
I'm eager to go back to it now and, try to piece it together. But I think meanwhile, I really would like to just do some shorter work. A novel, I don't know how you feel, Jill. I suspect it's probably the same, but it can just start to feel like a big, long trip that you're on. And and you don't know where you're going half the time. And when you get to the end, it's sort of like, planning another one of those seems overwhelming at the time.
Yeah, I agree. That's a wonderful description. The very long trip.
Getting lost and getting lost and getting on the wrong train.
Yeah, both sad to leave it, but you can't imagine turning around and starting.
Right. Yeah, you can't turn around and go back, and you don't know where the next stop is. And sometimes you don't know who you're sitting with on the train. Don't like who you're sitting with on the train.
Jill, do you want to answer the same question? What are you working on and what are you enjoying reading lately?
Well, and I'm doing a similar thing in the aftermath of novel. I'm working on some short stories, and the two books I have bedside, fiction, nonfiction, Douglas Stewart's Shuggie Bain, speaking of Irish writers, and I just bought at Flyleaf James Carroll's The Truth at the Heart of the Lie about the Catholic Church. Which
nice
is
one.
really, really a powerful, wonderful book.
All right. Awesome. Dropping those links in the chat right now. And I think I'm working with your team at Algonquin on this, but I think we're going to have Jill come do a writing workshop with us sometime this summer virtually. So
yes, that is being planned. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm. And I think we have a recording from our video or event we did for the release of hieroglyphics on our Facebook page. So if you're interested in that, I think you can still find it there. But yeah, instead of doing a similar event for the paperback release, we're going to do a writing workshop instead, which I think should be a lot of fun.
I just wish Dee was here in person so we could all go out to dinner now.
Yeah, that would be
too. I know.
Yeah.
Next time.
In the books for when everything is hopefully open again.
Exactly. We're getting there.
Thank you for tuning in.
Of course. Yeah, thank you everybody. And thank you, Dee and Jill. Thank you so much. It's been such a treat to hear y'all chat tonight. If anyone wants to buy a copy of Aviary or pre-order the paperback of hieroglyphics or find past books from both Dee and Jill, you can click that green link right below our faces and find those. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Well, thank you. A great honor to get to celebrate this novel. So cheers, Dee.
Yeah, cheers. Have a good evening, y'all.
Good evening.
Bye. Good night.
Thanks